At 3 a.m., I sent my boss a text. Do you want a kid? 10 minutes later, my phone lit up. Meeting tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Have the materials ready. I glanced at the cold, heartless command from my corporate slave driver, then at the little guy sleeping soundly in my bed. It was hard to imagine my boss and I having a kid together. I became an instant mom at 28. But the kid didn't come from a doctor, he came from Mrs. Davis, the cleaning lady in my building. I was completely stunned when she knocked on my door, holding a little boy's hand. He looked to be about 5 or 6, with bright, sparkling black eyes and a cute dimple on each cheek. He was wearing a short-sleeved shirt and overalls, with a little yellow duck backpack, and was impeccably clean. You could tell his parents took great care of him. He was the kind of kid who instantly makes you smile. That is, until he called me mommy. The moment he saw me, the little boy's eyes lit up. He let go of Mrs. Davis's hand and barreled straight into my arms, hugging my waist tightly. Mommy! He yelled. My eyes went wide. Before I could even say a word, I saw Mrs. Davis scurrying away, mumbling something about needing to go home and cook dinner. The little boy snuggled against my waist and looked up at me with his big, shiny eyes. Mommy, where's Daddy? What mommy and daddy? I'm a single woman who's never even been in a serious relationship. Where would a kid this big come from? I knelt down, placed a finger on his forehead, and gently pushed him back. I'm not your mommy, and there's no daddy here. Yes, you are. You are. The little boy's eyes turned red, and he shouted with his cheeks puffed out. Mommy's name is Anna Adams, and Daddy's name is Ethan Shaw. I'm not wrong. My stomach dropped, and my eyebrow twitched. My name is Anna Adams. And Ethan Shaw is my boss. To prove he wasn't mistaken, the kid rattled off both my and Ethan's phone numbers and social security numbers without taking a breath. Then he puffed out his little chest and stood proudly in front of me, his eyes blinking expectantly. Even without him saying a word, I could practically hear him thinking, praise me. Aren't I the best? Sighing, I rubbed my forehead and had no choice but to let him in. I bent down and took out a pair of disposable slippers from the shoe cabinet for him. To my surprise, he carefully placed his own shoes neatly to the side. He had excellent manners. But the boy was clearly unhappy with my earlier reaction. He sat on the sofa with his lips pursed, refusing to say a word. He was obviously sulking. I found it amusing and took the leftover ice cream from the fridge to offer him. The little boy's face lit up as he took it. Since you shared with me, he said between bites, I won't tell on you. I raised an eyebrow. Tell on me for what? He grinned and held up the half-eaten ice cream bar. This. Daddy says you can't eat this because it always gives you a stomachache. That was odd. It's true that I can't handle too much cold food, but I have no self-control and always keep some in the house. Still, I was skeptical. The whole situation was just too bizarre. As we talked, I learned the little boy's name was Leo. He was 5 years old, and he lived at 28 Riverview Drive in Phoenix Point. He said he got lost walking home from school, then ran into Mrs. Davis, who brought him to me. I pulled out my phone and opened the map. There was a Riverview Drive in New York City, but it was in a new district that was still under development. There were no residential buildings there. According to the city plans, there probably would be in a few years. A strange feeling crept over me. I bit my lip and asked cautiously, Leo, do you know what year it is? Leo nodded his little head. I know this one. My teacher taught us. It's 2031. 2031? I glanced at the calendar on my desk, which had a picture of a cute little bunny on it for 2023. Oh my God. Leo was from 8 years in the future. I looked at the little boy in front of me, happily devouring his ice cream. There was something familiar about his eyes and the curve of his brow. Wait a second. Who did he say his dad was again? Ethan Shaw. It was 3 a.m. After finally getting the kid to sleep, I lay in bed, tossing and turning as if I'd chugged 8 iced Americanos. Beside me, I could hear soft, steady breathing. I turned my head and saw the little guy, who had been a ball of energy just hours before, sleeping peacefully. He smacked his lips, dreaming of who knows what. On a strange impulse, I grabbed my phone and opened my message thread with my boss. It was all work, file after file, meeting minutes, and his daily schedule. After a moment's thought, I typed out a sentence and hit send. "Do you want a kid?" 10 minutes later, a reply came through. I held my breath, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened the message. "Meeting tomorrow at 8:30 a.m. Remember to prepare the materials." Staring at the cold, heartless command, I glanced at the time. Gritting my teeth, I got out of bed to work for the damn slave driver. Serves him right for being single at his age. He can marry his work for all I care. After pulling an all-nighter to get the meeting materials ready, I handed them off to a colleague. I asked my jerk of a boss for some time off, dropped Leo at the daycare near my apartment, and then rushed to the office. With a 5-year-old at home, I couldn't leave him by himself all day. By the time I got to the office, it was 10:30 a.m., and 2 new files were already on my desk. Mark, the colleague who helped me out this morning, came over. "The boss wants to see you in his office as soon as you get in." I nodded, picking up the new files and reading them as I walked. When I reached the CEO's office, the door was closed, but I could faintly hear a woman's voice inside. It sounded heated, like an argument, though I could only hear her. I raised an eyebrow but didn't knock, just stood outside and continued reading my files. About 10 minutes later, the door opened, and a stunning woman with a knockout figure walked out. "Miss Sinclair," I said with a polite nod. But she was clearly in a foul mood. She shot me a nasty glare and stormed off. I waited a couple of minutes, then walked in with the files and saw Ethan Shaw sitting behind his mahogany desk. He wore a pair of gold-rimmed glasses, a black fountain pen in his hand, his thin lips pressed into a firm line as he focused on a contract. It was as if a beautiful woman hadn't just been in his office, and no conflict had occurred. I couldn't help but admire him. He was the definition of unflappable. After finishing the contract, he signed his name with a few quick strokes, then looked up at me, his sharp gaze sweeping over me. "Ms. Adams, are you free tomorrow evening?" he asked. I mentally ran through my schedule. "I don't have any other plans at the moment." "Good. Accompany me to a banquet. It starts at 6:30 and should be over by 8 o'clock, he said. I nodded. I could probably pick Leo up, get him settled at home, and then go to the party. Leo would be fine by himself for a couple of hours. With that decided, Ethan waved his hand, dismissing me. I put the files on his desk before leaving. As I reached the door, I suddenly thought of Leo's mysterious appearance and glanced back at Ethan, who was taking off his glasses to pinch the bridge of his nose. His features were sharp, his jawline clean and defined. He had narrow, long eyes that tilted up slightly at the corners. When he looked down, you could see his thick, long eyelashes. Aside from the cold, indifferent expression on his face, he really did bear a striking resemblance to Leo. When I got back to my desk, my colleague Lily leaned over. She asked if the boss had asked me to go to the banquet with him. Before I could answer, she launched into the latest gossip. Apparently, Chloe Sinclair had come in that morning demanding to be his date for the event. Everyone had a headache when it came to Miss Sinclair. My boss, Ethan Shaw, was the sole heir to the Shaw family of New York City and the head of the Apex Group. He wasn't just from a powerful family, he was also brilliant in his own right. He'd been called back to work at the family company during his sophomore year of college. Under his leadership, Apex Group's stock had multiplied several times over, and the company had expanded into real estate, entertainment, and technology. He was handsome, wealthy, and kept to himself, so he was constantly surrounded by women. All the big-shot execs with daughters came sniffing around, eager to snag this ultimate catch for their families. But Ethan was ice-cold to everyone, his eyes only on his work. After a while, most of the heiresses gave up. They were all spoiled princesses, after all, with their own pride and egos. It was always, bye, Felicia. On to the next one. But Chloe Sinclair was different. She was incredibly persistent, showing up at the office every few days. Ethan always maintained his cold demeanor, but it was hell for the rest of us who worked there. Ms. Sinclair seemed to think she was already Mrs. Shaw, bossing everyone around every time she visited. And she especially had it out for me. There were 5 assistants in the executive office, 3 men and 2 women, and Lily had been married for years. So, in Chloe's eyes, I was the scheming vixen trying to seduce Ethan. She gave me a hard time every chance she got. The next morning, after dropping Leo off at daycare, I went to the hospital to submit samples for a DNA test. I decided that if the results came back and Leo was telling the truth, I would tell Ethan. After all, 2 heads are better than 1, and Ethan's brain was a lot sharper than mine. This kid was half his responsibility, too. I left work half an hour early that afternoon, picked up Leo, and explained the evening's plans to him before changing, doing my makeup, and heading out. The gown was from Ethan, a dark green, form-fitting velvet slip dress that made my skin look pale and luminous. The neckline was modest, sitting about an inch below my collarbones. I swept my hair up with a sandalwood pin, leaving a few wisps to frame my face. As if anticipating the bareness of my neck, Ethan had also provided a jewelry set, a purple diamond necklace with matching earrings. I had to admit, the man had excellent taste. When I stepped out of my room, all dressed up, Leo let out a little wow. "Mommy, are you and Daddy going to another party?" Seeing the confused look on my face, Leo puffed out his little chest. "You guys are always trying to trick me so you can have a date night. Daddy picked out this dress again, didn't he? He always makes you look like a princess." He let out a little huff. I blinked, a strange, subtle feeling fluttering in my heart. When I got downstairs, my boss's car was already waiting by the curb. I opened the door to get in and saw Ethan sitting in the back. For a second, I hesitated. "Get in," Ethan's cool voice commanded. I quickly lowered my head, gathered my skirt, and slid in. As I leaned over, I felt Ethan's gaze drift my way. I looked down and realized the low-cut neckline, held up by 2 thin straps, was gaping forward. From Ethan's angle, he could see everything. I instinctively clapped a hand to my chest, my face flushing hot and my ears turning red. It wasn't just about modesty, because of the dress, I hadn't worn a bra, just a pair of pasties. Ethan, however, showed no reaction. By the time I was settled, he had already opened his laptop to work. I don't know if it was just my imagination, but the atmosphere in the car felt incredibly awkward, and Ethan seemed unusually stiff. I noticed that the PowerPoint slide on his screen hadn't changed in over 10 minutes. It was still on the initial project summary page. Since I was in charge of that project, I thought there might be a problem and leaned over to take a look. "About this project, ah." Just as I started to speak, a dark shadow darted in front of the car. The driver quickly spun the wheel and slammed on the brakes. Already leaning over, I lost my balance. With nothing to grab onto, I went tumbling straight toward Ethan. Determined not to be shoved away, I twisted my body with all my might. I figured a face plant on the floor was better than offending my boss. But just as I was about to fall, a long, strong hand grabbed my arm and pulled me back. I ended up in Ethan's arms anyway, with one of his hands on my arm and the other around my waist. The faint scent of sandalwood filled my senses. It was steady and subtle, just like him. In that instant, I looked up and saw his face in the half-light, his profile sharp and handsome. It was a stray cat. "We didn't hit it," the driver reported after getting out to check. He got back in and started the car. Just then, Ethan released me. I immediately sat up straight, turning my head to the side and pretending to be captivated by the scenery outside. But it was already dark, and there was nothing to see but the blurry shapes of trees speeding by. I pressed my lips together, trying my best to ignore the frantic thumping of my heart. Ethan asked, "Are you okay?" I shook my head. "I'm fine." The first half of the banquet went smoothly. All I had to do was stand next to Ethan and be a smiling accessory. But just as the evening was winding down, Chloe Sinclair showed up. I was sitting in a corner, enjoying some dessert, when she stormed over, her face a mask of fury. "You bitch." She stomped over in her 6-inch stilettos, looking down her nose at me. "Do you really think a broke nobody like you can dream of being with Ethan? The Shaws will never let you into their family." I stared at her blankly for a few seconds, then forced myself to swallow the cake in my mouth. Oh. Whether the Shaw family let me in or not had nothing to do with her. As long as the Apex group let me in, I was fine. Seeing her punch land on a pillow, Chloe's face turned red with rage. Her eyes darted to the glass of red wine on the table. Before she could make her move, I snatched it and downed it in one gulp. You. She sputtered, her finger trembling as she pointed at me. Suddenly, she raised her hand high. Just as the slap was about to connect with my face, a tall, slender figure stepped in front of me. He caught Chloe's wrist in a tight grip. Instead of getting angry, her attitude did a complete 180. "Ethan, darling," she cooed in a sickeningly sweet voice. I involuntarily shivered, goosebumps rising on my skin. Noticing my reaction, Ethan's gaze hardened. He shot Chloe a freezing look, then took my hand and led me out. As we neared the exit, he took off his jacket and draped it over my shoulders. His body heat, mingled with the scent of sandalwood, instantly enveloped me. I felt dizzy for a second. My heart, which had just managed to calm down, started pounding wildly again, like a herd of rabbits stampeding in my chest. On the way back, Ethan sat in the back with me again. Just as we were nearing my apartment, Leo called me on the kid's smartwatch I'd bought him the day before. "Mommy, when are you coming home?" His clear, childish voice echoed in the quiet car. I glanced at Ethan and felt the air in the car turn ice cold. I softly told Leo I'd be there soon and coaxed him to end the call. I knew Ethan had heard him. After thinking it over, I decided to just ask. "Boss, what would you do if you suddenly had a 5-year-old son?" Ethan gave me a sideways glance. "Are you the mother?" I nodded instinctively. "Then I'd raise him," he said. Somehow, I felt the atmosphere in the car start to warm up again. It wasn't until I got out and the cold wind hit me that I remembered, I never told him he was the father. The next day, the DNA test results came back. They confirmed I was Leo's mother. I snuck into Ethan's office with the report. He was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, holding a glass of water. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, the tailored lines accentuating his tall, powerful frame. There was a cool, distant air about him as he gazed silently out the window. When he saw me enter, Ethan returned to his chair. I walked over, placed the report and a photo of Leo I'd taken that morning on his desk, and pushed them toward him. "Boss, what if I told you that you and I have a son, and he traveled back in time from 8 years in the future? Would you believe me?" Ethan looked at me like I was a lunatic, then glanced down at the evidence on his desk. His eyes landed on Leo's photo and froze. He looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He still had pictures of himself as a child at home, only he knew how much Leo looked exactly like him. They were practically carbon copies. He looked from Leo's picture to me, then back again, finally picking up the DNA report. "Are you serious?" I rolled my eyes. "Cross my heart." Ethan pressed his lips together, then immediately called a doctor friend of his to arrange a paternity test. I clearly heard the sound of something falling on the other end of the line and had to stifle a laugh. I had anticipated he would want his own test, so I'd brought a sample from Leo with me. The report was ready by that afternoon. The result, paternity confirmed. Leo really was my and Ethan's son. The realization left Ethan stunned for a long moment. Then, he gave me a look loaded with meaning. I immediately took 2 steps back. "Why are you looking at me like that? You don't think I'm going to try to take advantage of you, do you?" "Who's taking advantage of whom remains to be seen." Ethan didn't argue. He just raised a fist to his lips to hide a smile, but it was clear he was in a good mood. Realizing what I'd just said, my face flushed, and I rushed out of the room. After work, Ethan insisted on coming with me to pick up Leo from daycare. I didn't refuse. He was Leo's biological father, after all, and I needed his help sorting out Leo's legal documents. Leo came skipping out with his little backpack, chatting and laughing with his friends. When he saw me and Ethan standing together, his eyes grew wide, and a grin stretched from ear to ear. "Daddy! Mommy!" he shouted, running toward us. Ethan froze on the spot, his reaction no better than mine had been when I first met Leo. At Leo's fervent request, we went to the aquarium that evening. Yay! Leo was ecstatic, darting ahead like a little torpedo. He would only stop when he saw a sea creature he didn't recognize, looking back at us with wide, curious eyes. At those moments, Ethan would walk over, take his little hand, and tell him about each one, their names, their features, and some of their habits. I followed behind, holding Leo's jacket, watching Ethan crouch in front of a giant glass wall, the blue light illuminating his face. It was a gentleness I had never seen in him before. In that moment, the perfect dad Leo always talked about finally had a face. With Ethan's help, Leo's birth certificate and legal papers were sorted out quickly. After comparing a few options, we enrolled him in the preschool next to the daycare center. To my surprise, after learning Leo was his son, Ethan never once suggested taking him away from me. Instead, he started showing up at my apartment every few days, ostensibly to see Leo and bond with his son. Leo was all for it, giving the idea 2 thumbs up. After all, with me, his dinner options were limited to takeout or eating out. But every time Ethan came over, he would cook a feast. Like right now. Leo and I were in the living room working on a puzzle while Ethan was busy in the kitchen. When the savory aroma of pan-fried shrimp wafted out, I finally gave in, leaving Leo and tiptoeing toward the kitchen. Inside, Ethan stood at the stove wearing a gray apron, his expression serious and focused. He exuded an air of refined elegance that was completely at odds with the cramped space, let alone the smoky, sizzling shrimp. Ethan turned his head and, seeing me leaning casually against the doorframe, raised an eyebrow. "Come taste this for me." I grinned, grabbed a pair of chopsticks, and was about to pop a piece of shrimp into my mouth, completely forgetting to blow on it. The next second, I burned my tongue. Tears instantly welled up in my eyes. Ethan quickly turned off the stove and walked over, tilting my chin up. "Stick your tongue out, let me see," he said, his voice laced with concern. I tentatively stuck out the pink tip of my tongue. Ethan's eyes darkened, and his grip on my chin tightened slightly. An intimate atmosphere began to build between us. I suddenly realized how close we were. If he leaned down just a little, he could kiss me. My face flushed red, and I quickly pulled my tongue back in. "It's fine, I'll just get some water." With that, I fled the scene. I ran back to the living room, my heart pounding, finally managing to calm down. I smacked my forehead in frustration. I'd almost given in to temptation and kissed him. Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Ethan was kicking himself for not seizing the moment and kissing her. That weekend, the company organized a spring outing. I had planned to skip it since there was no one to look after Leo. "Then bring Leo with us," Ethan said, immediately shooting down my excuse. In the end, Leo joined the trip under the guise of being my relative's kid. On the morning of the outing, Lily called to tell me to hurry downstairs, they were already waiting. I ran to the balcony and saw Ethan's car parked by the curb. I hurried downstairs with Leo. When I opened the car door, I saw Mark in the driver's seat and Lily in the passenger seat. And Ethan was sitting in the back, dressed in casual sportswear. Leo was incredibly excited. His cheeks were flushed as he blinked at Ethan, then called out, "Hello, Uncle and Auntie." Mark and Lily turned around, smiling warmly at Leo. "Hey there, sweetie. Hello to you too." Once we were in the car, Leo sat in the middle, with Ethan and me on either side. Maybe it was my guilty conscience, but I felt on edge. Just then, Lily sent me a text, gushing about the boss. She said Mark had called her early that morning to tell her Ethan had invited her to ride with them. Ethan had even given her the front passenger seat, considering she was pregnant and prone to car sickness. Mr. Shaw is such a considerate and amazing boss. Seeing the dramatic emoji she sent, my mouth twitched. Leo had been too excited to sleep well last night and had woken up early, so he was getting sleepy. Less than 10 minutes into the drive, he was leaning against Ethan, dozing off. Ethan took off his jacket and draped it over him. From the front seat, Lily looked back in surprise. I never knew the boss liked kids so much. Ethan nodded. Leo and I just hit it off. Lily looked back and forth between us thoughtfully. You certainly do. Then she quickly looked down at her phone and started typing furiously. My phone vibrated like crazy. Your Leo looks so much like the boss. The three of you sitting together look like a perfect little family. If this keeps up, I'm going to start shipping you too. Me, innocent. JPG. Once we arrived at the picnic spot, Ethan thankfully stopped acting so conspicuously. A few other colleagues had brought their kids, and they all had a great time running around and playing together. Later, when the barbecue was ready, everyone gathered to eat. A colleague offered a lamb skewer to Leo. Before I could stop him, Ethan spoke up first. Leo doesn't eat lamb. The colleague looked at Leo, then at Ethan, then at me, his face a perfect picture of someone who had just stumbled upon a massive secret. Luckily, no one else nearby noticed, and that colleague wasn't a gossip. But I still snuck over to Ethan's side. Hey, could you tone it down? Are you trying to get us caught? Ethan looked at me innocently. Even if I told them, they wouldn't believe it. Besides, Leo is my son. What's wrong with caring about my own son? Hearing him say it so brazenly, I wanted to clamp a hand over his mouth. In the end, I could only warn him to be more careful before shooting him a glare and walking away. But just as he'd said, no one thought anything of it. At most, they made a few jokes and then dropped it. After the outing, Ethan first dropped Mark and Lily off, then drove to my building and carried the sleeping Leo upstairs. Looking at Leo, fast asleep on Ethan's shoulder, I couldn't help but sigh. It's nice to be a kid. Someone will carry you even when you're asleep. Ethan glanced at me when he heard that. Finally, after putting Leo to bed, he paused at the door before leaving. You know, he said, you could fall asleep, too. After a chaotic weekend, the dreaded Monday arrived. As soon as I walked into the office, I was hit with two pieces of big news. First, Ethan was going back to Columbia University, his alma mater, to give a speech as a distinguished alumnus. During his senior year, the Apex Group had established an honors scholarship at Columbia and donated a lot of money every year since. The university had asked him to speak several times before, but he'd always declined. Why agree now? Whatever Ethan's reasons, he had now handed the task to me. The speech was this Friday. I had to admit, the timing was tight. But thankfully, Columbia was also my alma mater, which made contacting the professors much easier. The second piece of news came from Lily via text. Apex Group had terminated a project with the Sinclair family, and Chloe Sinclair was back at the office. This time, however, she wasn't looking for Ethan. She was waiting for me in the executive office. Just seeing her name gave me a headache. But I couldn't hide forever, I had to go to work. The moment I stepped into the office, I saw a stunning woman with bright red lipstick sitting on the sofa. She was wearing a strapless mini dress, a cup of steaming coffee in front of her. It looked like she hadn't been waiting long. When she saw me, Chloe's gaze turned sharp. Was it you? Did you tell Ethan to stop working with my family? You bitch. You home-wrecking vixen. Do you really think trash like you can compete with me for a man? As her insults grew uglier, my expression darkened. Ms. Sinclair, you should think before you speak. And if you don't have a brain, you could at least fill your head with water. Don't let your intestines take up all the space. Lily snorted with laughter, understanding that I had just called Ms. Sinclair full of crap. Chloe didn't get the joke, but she knew it wasn't a compliment. Furious, she grabbed her purse and hurled it at me. I dodged the bag, but I didn't see the chain strap coming. It whipped across my jaw, leaving a stinging red mark. "Anna!" Lily cried, rushing to stand in front of me. I pulled her behind me. Lily was pregnant, and someone like Chloe wouldn't think twice about the consequences if she started getting physical. The atmosphere was tense and deadlocked. Just then, Ethan appeared in the doorway. Chloe instantly transformed from a raging beast into a delicate, wilting flower, her eyes red and pitiful. But Ethan didn't even glance at her. His gaze fixed on my chin, and he coldly told me to come to his office. Lily tugged on my sleeve. "The boss looks really angry. I didn't even see him this mad when we lost that $200 million project." I nodded in agreement and, bracing myself, pushed open the door to Ethan's office. Ethan was on the phone, pacing angrily by the sofa. I only caught the last 2 lines. "Who does he think he is, coming to Apex to throw his weight around and hitting my people? Cut them all off." Ending the call, he gritted his teeth and looked at me. "Are you made of wood? She hits you, and you just stand there and let her?" I bit my lip. I tried to dodge. I just wasn't fast enough. He shot me a look of pure frustration. "Come here." He then produced a bottle of antiseptic spray and some bandages from somewhere. "Let's disinfect this first." He gently dabbed my wound with a cotton swab, his movements light and careful. I looked up and saw his lowered eyelashes, long and curled, just like Leo's. The room grew quiet, and it felt like we were back in my kitchen. Ethan looked up, and our eyes met. It was as if an electric current passed between us. He slowly leaned in, his soft lips pressing against mine. On some strange impulse, I didn't pull away. Oh my God. I kissed Ethan. I kissed my boss. Sitting at my desk, I couldn't snap out of it. My mind was filled with the image of Ethan's desire-filled eyes and his soft lips. Lily walked by and saw me running my hands through my hair, turning it into a bird's nest. She patted my shoulder. "What's wrong with you?" I turned to her, swallowed hard, and asked, "What does it mean if you kiss someone, and it feels nice?" Lily stared at me for a long moment, then blinked. "You kissed the boss?" Seeing my horrified expression, Lily rolled her eyes dramatically. "I knew it. I could tell the boss had a thing for you for a while now. Haven't you noticed that the 2 times he asked me to a banquet just happened to be when you were on your period? And what about the dresses and jewelry for those events? I had to go to the external affairs department to get mine, but yours were personally selected by the boss and delivered to your door. And that time you said you loved the sweet and sour ribs in the cafeteria? After he overheard you, we had sweet and sour ribs for a week straight. And also..." Just then, Mark walked by and chimed in, "I've known the boss liked Anna for ages." He glanced at me. "Last Christmas Eve, I came back to the office to grab something and saw him secretly kiss you while you were asleep." My face turned beet red. I remembered that night. I had a deadline and had also caught a cold. After taking some medicine, I'd passed out at my desk. When I woke up, there was a blanket draped over me, and the office heat was set to the perfect temperature. Even though Ethan was the only other person working late that night, who would have thought? Especially since, after I woke up, he just handed me another urgent file to deal with. Who would have guessed he'd secretly kissed me just 10 minutes before? No wonder he was still single. The man was clueless. After that day, I started avoiding Ethan. Mainly because I realized I had feelings for him, too. Every time I saw him, my heart would start pounding, and I couldn't think straight. During the morning meeting, I found myself staring at his lips as he spoke, watching them move. It reminded me of our kiss. My phone vibrated. I opened it to a text from Ethan. "Stop ogling me like a starving wolf. I can't focus on the meeting." I quickly looked down, wiping away imaginary drool. Soon, the day of the university speech arrived. Ethan declined the university's offer of a handler. After his speech, he and I took a stroll through the campus in the evening breeze. It was early autumn, and some of the leaves had already turned yellow, fluttering to the ground with every gust of wind. This time of night, the little park is usually filled with couples, I said with a nostalgic smile. I remember when I was a student, all I did here was study and memorize vocabulary. Ethan smiled as if remembering something, too. I know. Huh. I turned to look at him. When I was a freshman, he would have been a senior, busy with work at Apex Group. How would he know about me? Ethan's lips curved. I don't just know that you like to study here. I also know you like to come here to cry. I blinked, wondering if he was even talking about me. Suddenly, a memory flashed through my mind like a bolt of lightning. It was you. In the second semester of my freshman year, it was time for the Honors Scholarship Awards. My grades were top of my class in every subject, and I was active in all sorts of campus activities. According to the student handbook's formula, I should have been the clear winner. But when the scholarship list was announced, I was second. The top spot went to the class officer in charge of calculating the scores. When I confronted him with my transcripts and the handbook, he just said he didn't use that method and told me to take it up with a professor if I had a problem. The list was already public, and since his family had connections, the professors weren't willing to help me. Feeling utterly defeated, I ran to the little grove to cry. After a while, someone handed me a pack of tissues. I was too embarrassed to look up, with tears and snot all over my face, but I saw that the hand belonged to a guy. Seeing that I remembered, Ethan reached out and patted my head. I knew who you were even before that. Ethan said he heard me reciting my notes almost every time he passed by the grove. Sometimes, I would get stuck and quietly curse at myself. Other times, when I was on a roll, I'd praise myself to the high heavens. He was exhausted from work at the time, but hearing my voice made him think about what a unique person I was. Like a stubborn blade of grass, full of life and energy. Later, he learned my name and found out I was top of my class. So, when he saw the official scholarship list online, the first thing he did was go to the grove to find me. And sure enough, there I was, crying. He was just glad he happened to have a pack of tissues on him. Hearing his story, I blinked, suddenly remembering that the Apex Group scholarship had been established that same year. Could it be? Seeing the astonished look on my face, Ethan looked flustered for the first time. He nodded. My heart felt like it had been struck by something. It wasn't just the scholarship. A few days after the list was published, the class officer's misconduct was exposed. The rumor was that someone had reported him. Looking back, it was almost certainly Ethan. Near the end of the workday, Leo called to say he was craving the mung bean pastries from a bakery downtown. He asked if I could pick some up for him, promising he could get home by himself. After his repeated assurances, I agreed. Because of the detour and the long line at the bakery, I got home almost an hour later than usual. When I opened the door, the apartment was pitch black. The curtains were drawn, and all the doors were closed. I paused, then reached for the light switch. The living room lights flickered on, revealing a room filled with heart-shaped balloons. On the coffee table sat a single pink envelope. I walked over and picked it up. Breaking the rose-shaped wax seal, I caught a faint, sweet fragrance. It was a love letter. Inside was a long, handwritten message. Holding it, my first thought wasn't about its contents, but about a conversation at the office once, where colleagues were talking about getting love letters in school. I had said I'd never received one. Lily had joked that if I didn't get one in school, I definitely wouldn't get one later. But now, here I was, holding a love letter of my own, filled with someone's feelings for me. It was signed, Ethan. He said I was his one and only moon. Next to the letter was a sketchbook filled with drawings of me. I looked at the date on each one. The earliest was from last year. Before Leo had even arrived. Soft, beautiful music began to play. Ethan walked out, holding a bouquet of pink champagne roses, his eyes fixed on me. He said, "Anna Adams, will you be my girlfriend?" He said he wasn't choosing to be with me because of Leo, but because he was in love with me. His eyes seemed to hold the entire night sky, sparkling brightly. Anna, I love you. I wiped away a tear and nodded joyfully. At 30, Ethan and I got married. Leo was our ring bearer. One day, when I was 31, Leo disappeared. 2 months later, I found out I was pregnant. 7 months after that, I gave birth to a boy. We named him Ethan Jr., and his nickname was Leo.